Cecilia.
Good morning,
Just
Abigail.
remind us and enlighten us once again of this entire case. It's been long ongoing. There was a point where the charges were dropped, then they were reinstated. Just talk us through this entire case, rather.
Yes, a very, very long time. The first charged, I think, in 2005, and the charges were then dropped after Judge Nicholson, a judge from the Pietermaritzburg High Court, he's appearing in the Durban High Court now, said that the charges were that the NPA had not given Zuma, well, he wasn't President Zuma at that stage, or deputy, but the opportunity to make representations, and he said that the charges were politically charged. And so this political charging, the politics behind these charges has always been a really big feature of the charges, right from the start. The SCA then, overturned that particular decision, saying that in fact, if there was a prima facie case against him, they should bring the charges. Even the fact that they were politically or may have been politically motivated, or there may have been political motivation, is neither here nor there. If there was evidence, then they should be tested in court. Mm-hmm. So, but the charges were never reinstated after that. What came to light was a conversation which was held between certain members of the Scorpions at that time. I beg your pardon. Yeah. Now known as the spy tapes, which seem to indicate that there could be a political motive behind the charges, and Mshere at later dropped the charges and have. This is the first time they've been reinstated since then. So it's been a very long story around these charges. I heard, people sometimes think that there were 780 whatever charges. There were never 780. There were 18 charges, but there were counts of the charges, and those 718 counts, as people refer to them, were actually relate to a spreadsheet, a very long and involved spreadsheet of payments that were made between his financial advisor and Zuma, and this was for all sorts of things, for a valet of a car, for clothing, for school fees, etc., etc. So there was, a whole range of different things. The charges relate to basically three things. One, the fraud charges relate to his tax. What the NPA maintains is tax evasion. Mm-hmm. The corruption and the other charges relate to payments that were made first to influence or to gain attraction for the for Thompson's, which was the tails at that time, and in Colby Holdings, for them to get a foothold into the arms deal. And then later, when questions were being asked about the arms deal, to influence or to take away the heat off tails as far as that is concerned.
Cecilia, let's just leave it there for now. We will continue to discuss those charges and talk through those. But joining us on the phone line now is Director at Accountability Now, Advocate Paul Hoffman, joins us on the phone line. Good morning to you, Advocate. Thank you for joining us here on ANN7. If you could also just kindly provide us some more clarity with regards to these charges against President Jacob Zuma.
Yes, certainly, with pleasure. The history of this case goes back about 11 years. That was the first time that he was indicted, and the fact that he's indicted again and appearing in court this morning is really a triumph for the rule of law in South Africa, and in particular for our Bill of Rights, which insists that we are all equal before the law. Many people have suggested that Jacob Zuma is above the law. The fact that he will be gracing the dock in the Durban High Court this morning shows that that is not the case, and this is a very healthy sign for constitutional democracy in South Africa. best way to summarize the case is to remind your viewers that Shabir Sheikh was in fact charged for about 238 of the 783 transactions and was found guilty and was sentenced to 15 years imprisonment for involving Jacob Zuma in a corrupt relationship with him. What we are now seeing in prospect, and it's not going to happen today, what's going to happen today is that the case is going to be postponed. There will be preliminary skirmishes in relation to whether or not the representations by Zuma ought to have been listened to by Sean Abrams in his capacity as National Director of Public Prosecutions, whether or not there should be a review of that, whether a permanent stay of prosecution application should be granted to Mr. Zuma, and of course the burning question of who is going to pay his legal fees, where there is already litigation pending aimed at not allowing the state to continue to pay for Mr. Zuma's legal fees. So although this is a big day in the sense that the criminal case against Jacob Zuma has now at last got him to the point where he is in the dock in a criminal court, I think we can all anticipate that it is going to take many years for these charges to come to fruition, given all of the preliminary aspects that Mr. Zuma is likely to raise if he runs true to form, and also to the fact that if he is convicted, if he is found to have had the necessary criminal intent in his relationship with Mr. Sheikh, that he is likely to appeal both to the Supreme Court of Appeal and, if unsuccessful there, to the Constitutional Court. So it's the beginning of a long road.
Mr. Hoffman, let's just chat briefly about the possible outcomes of this court case. I know it has been long ongoing and there's been times when the charges were dropped, but talk us through the various options when it comes to what possibly could be the conclusion here.
Well, if the review or the stay of prosecution proceedings are successful, that will be the end of the matter, and Mr. Zuma will go to Nkandla and retire happily to play with his grandchildren. However, if those essentially civil proceedings are not successful, the trial will commence and the state will be obliged to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Mr. Zuma is guilty of each and every element of each and every charge that is pursued. And that will involve 207 witnesses, or some of them, giving evidence against him, and it will also involve him in seeking to persuade the court that it is reasonably possibly true that he did not have any criminal intention when he involved himself in that ongoing symbiosis with Mr. Shabir Sheikh, in terms of which, as we've heard a few minutes ago, even his children's school fees were paid by Mr. Sheikh. And the trial is not likely to start anytime soon because the review and the stay and the squabble about who's paying the costs are all going to have to be sorted out first. That is why we at Accountability Now have suggested that the state would be better advised not to proceed now with that case, but instead to proceed with the case against Mr. Zuma relating to the way in which he got rid of Mr. Nklasana as the National Director of Public Prosecutions. We've maintained since that happened, which was in mid-2015, that was a corrupt activity, and it is only one transaction, not 783 transactions, a short, sharp trial on that one transaction if successful, would lead to similar punishment, that is that minimum 15-year corrupt activity sentence. And we would not be involving the state in the not inconsiderable delays and costs and resources that will be applied if the big case is put at the front of the stove and everything else is made to wait.
Mr. Hoffman, or Advocate Hoffman, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you dissecting this for us and just talking us through the various options as well. That was Director at Accountability Now, Advocate Paul Hoffman, joining us on the phone line as we wait